Let's get started today, everybody. Thank you for coming back to day 2. Welcome, welcome, welcome. This is day 2 of the stakeholder consultation event focused on the RFSA RFA design and process. Just as we did yesterday, we'll be providing French interpretation for this event. So if you'd like to follow the event in French, you'll need to click on the small globe at the bottom of your Zoom screen where it says interpretation, and then select French. And once you've selected French, you can choose to mute the original audio, or you can hear it in the background at a lower volume. And also for everyone, due to this interpretation that we have, we do ask everyone when you are speaking to please speak clearly and directly into your microphone so our interpreters can really understand clearly and be able to translate clearly for those that need it. If you have any technical issues during the webinar, please send a chat message to anyone with Ideal in their name or who has this beautiful background screen, and we'll do our best to assist you. And as mentioned, we would love for you to change your name to include your organization and your preferred name. So as a reminder, you click on the participants button at the bottom of the Zoom window. You hover your mouse over your name in the participants list on the right side of the Zoom window, and then click on rename and enter the name you'd like to appear in the Zoom meeting, and then you can click OK. Let us know if you have any issues with that and we can help you. So just like yesterday, we'll be working in Miro, the Miro platform, but it will be done just primarily through the screen share on Zoom. So you won't yourself have to navigate through anything. And again, you can zoom into the screen on your Zoom window screen. If we're sharing things that you need to see a little bit closer or clearer. And to do that, you go to the top of your screen next to the green strip that says Sharing Kim Ideal's screen. To the right, there's View Options, and you can choose your preferred Zoom percent. And when you click that Zoom percentage, your cursor will turn into a little hand, and you can click and drag your screen around. I think you'll probably be using that more today, that function more today. So just keep in mind that that option is available to you. And if you have any issues whatsoever, please let us know. We don't want anything holding people back from participating in full. And speaking of participation, please, there are multiple ways you can participate today. You can raise your hand either physically on the camera. You can use the nonverbal tools on Zoom by raising your virtual hand, and you can unmute yourself as needed. Use the chat box to ask any questions, add any comments. That was super helpful yesterday for us to see your comments coming through, and provide any feedback that you have in a private message or to the whole group. Either way is completely fine with us. And we may occasionally call on people if we want to hear your voice as well. I just want to pause and see if anybody had any tech issues yesterday or today, or any issues that you'd like to bring forward that we can address before we move on to make sure that everybody is able to participate fully. Please at this time, let us know so we can address it. If not, oh, somebody says a Zoom link in the email this morning wasn't working, but the link in the calendar invitation worked. Uh-oh, the Eventbrite email.
Yes, that was true for me too. The reminder email, I was just sending an email to some of the Ideal staff. The reminder email this morning leads to a link to yesterday's meeting room.
Oh.
So you might want to send another. It could have gotten in the way of some people joining today.
Thank you for letting us know. I will hand that to Kim or somebody from our tech team to address immediately. Thank you for that. All right, so as a reminder, we'll be recording all of the plenary discussions today. We will not be recording the breakout room discussions. So same as yesterday. And we'd like to start us off with a virtual mingle like we did yesterday. So we will be putting you into small breakout rooms to introduce yourselves and answer the question, what did you want to be when you were growing up? So you will have 5 minutes total for this virtual mingle. And again, the question, what did you want to be when you were growing up? All right, so we're now going to briefly go over the parking lot that we had set aside for you to use yesterday. This is a reminder that for today, also, if you have anything you'd like to add to the parking lot, you can type what you'd like to be added to that in the chat and indicate that you would like it in the parking lot, or you can always let your facilitator in your breakout room know. We actually didn't have many additions to the parking lot yesterday. I did want to acknowledge the 2 that did show up. One was from the one to the right, I think, was from a participant who just wanted to understand more about the co-creation process. So we'll make sure that someone reaches out to you about that specifically to clarify. And then the other comment was actually a recommendation that actually fits nicely into one of today's themes around the multi-phased approach breakout group. So we would encourage this comment or this recommendation to be brought up in that specific breakout room. So we'll ensure that that one is addressed in the multi-phased approach room. Other than that, those are the only 2 that we had in the parking lot. So just feel free to add anything else that might come up today to that, and we'll throw it in there and we'll address it before the end of the day. And now I'd just like to also briefly go through our survey feedback from yesterday, and you all made our lives very easy with the survey feedback, as much of your comments were confirmed across multiple participants. So that helped us to have a clear direction for adapting today's session. But overall, we got positive, very constructive feedback about day 1. So many thanks for your candid thoughts. First and foremost, overwhelmingly, most of you really enjoyed the flow of the event, and especially the breakout room sessions and the opportunity to dialogue together and have rich conversations around the themes. But of course, you also wanted more time in these breakout room discussions. So today we've adjusted the agenda to allow for an additional 15 minutes minimum discussion today, in addition to the original hour window that we had allotted. And we'll have room to revisit that as we see how the breakout rooms are going. And secondly, not necessarily an adjustment that needs to be made, but more of a keep up the good work comment from many of you was the positive tone of collaboration that you found present in yesterday's session, especially in seeing and hearing BHA staff's presence and voices at the event. So, and we as IDEAL also want to reiterate our appreciation for the support and participation that we've received from BHA in the event planning and design and during this 2-day event. So that was very positive feedback. I want to acknowledge that we received a handful of specific content related feedback on the themes or things that came up in the discussion or more ideas and recommendations. So we do encourage you. So we've made note of those recommendations and those comments that we will incorporate into the after event report that we're going to be writing up. But we also encourage you, if you would like, and if there's opportunity, to bring those up in relevant discussions today as well with your colleagues and peers. And finally, we did receive some feedback from several of you that perhaps the take space, make space ground rule may need to be emphasized a bit more. So we do encourage you to be more self-aware today as participants of if you may be taking up more space at the expense of other voices, and alternatively, if you may need to step up a little bit more and take more space in your breakout rooms. So with the adjustments that we've made to the agenda, you can see there we've changed up the times a little bit to give a little bit more time for breakout rooms, which we'll be going into shortly. First, we'll do, Suzanne will give us an overview of the major themes again that we're going to be addressing today. We're going to be addressing 5 new themes in addition to the 3 that we did yesterday. And then we'll be doing breakout rooms on those themes. We'll be doing the gallery walk like we did yesterday. And then we'll be taking and the breakout room will include a break. And then we'll be taking another break after the gallery walk. And then we'll be doing our overall prioritization activity with all the recommendations that came up from yesterday and today. With that, I will hand it over to Suzanne to go over our next portion.
Great. Thanks, Bianca. I do want to just make one housekeeping announcement since everyone is coming back from a breakout that you need to rejoin interpretation. Since when we go into the breakouts, that changes. So in plenary, please rejoin the interpretation. And then also, I know a few people joined a little bit late. Just a reminder, please change your Zoom name to your name and your organization. I think that just helps everyone to know who's around and who's in the room. So we just want to remind everyone, really the ultimate objective of the stakeholder consultation is increasing the quality of programming for RFSAs to reduce food insecurity. So we are the pathways that we've envisioned for this is, shaping the RFSA solicitation process and content in order to improve the clarity of the RFAs, improving the quality of those RFSA designs, and lowering the barriers to allow for a wider range of applicants. So we, want to remind everyone, again, share your thoughts openly. What Dan spoke of yesterday morning of, we want to hear all your ideas. We want you to speak frankly. And all of those recommendations will be reviewed and considered, but not every recommendation will be actionable. And again, those actionable recommendations may not be completed in the time that we necessarily want. And just another reminder that we really appreciate BHA's open engagement and discussion, but the currently open RFAs should not be discussed, and and BHA will not be answering questions specific to those RFAs. Revisiting our ground rules. So again, be present, engage thoughtfully in the conversation. I think people modeled this really great. Yesterday, listen respectfully as people share. And going back to Bianca's comment about sharing the air and really being self-aware of when you need to step back or when you need to step up and take up more space. And I'll also note that we gave some more instruction to our facilitators today to be a bit more assertive too in making that space for everybody's voices to be heard as well. So please note that there may be more interruption or there may be more asking for participation today in your breakouts, especially. Again, no personal or organizational identifying information should be shared after this event. We are not recording the names of who spoke, the organizations related to that in our notes, and we ask that you not share personal experiences of anyone else or any particular organization. We want to, again, have that open, free discussion, but without assigning those experiences to anyone. So let's revisit our major themes. As a reminder, we had 9 themes that came up through the pre-consultation interviews. We will not be specifically addressing proposal development burden, but it is something that stretches across all of the themes, and so we know it will happen in there. The theory, yesterday we talked about theory of change, complexity versus focus, and prescriptiveness versus and level of detail. Today, we're going to focus on barriers to application for new and non-historic partners, RFA release timing, multi-phased approach, key personnel, and contextual information. So yesterday there were 3 themes in 5 breakout rooms. And so a couple of the themes, there were 2 different breakout rooms discussing the same theme. Today, there are 5 themes, 5 different breakout rooms. So no one is discussing the same specific theme. Although again, there may be things that go across the different themes, recommendations that come up that are relevant for multiple themes. And that's fine, that's encouraging. That actually helps us in terms of prioritization. So let's get into the specific themes that we are discussing today. RFA release timing. We heard from many partners that they really want to hear as soon as possible what potential countries there will be, what potential locations there are for RFSAs. It allows them to better prepare for the proposal development process, thinking about design, thinking about the teams that need to be put together. Also, there was a note on concern about inconsistent timing of the publications of draft and final RFAs, not knowing how long it will be before a draft RFA is released, and even after the draft RFA released, when that final RFA will be published, the consistency and the timing between those. And so really a lot of this was about sharing information clearly, consistently, as early as possible. Multi-phased approach. Many partners made suggestions about how they would like to see the different phases used that are used now, especially noting that now that there is a co-creation and R&I process, that maybe that initial proposal phase is really too complex and too intensive. And some of the pieces of that could be moved to later phases. And I know there was discussion about that yesterday as well. Another concern that was raised is that that local partners were restricted in their influence to design in the first phase, both because of the length of it, the complexity of it, as well as the non-compete rules, or needing to allow local partners to not sign on exclusively with any particular organization. Barriers for new and non-historic partners included that the cost of putting together a proposal, as well as lack of information on prospective RFSA locations. A lot of partners saw that, if you've been in this game longer, you have more channels for gathering information, for doing that, understanding, the signs of what might come, or that there are formal channels that maybe other partners just aren't aware of and aren't a part of. Another barrier that was noted was just overall less familiarity with the specific terminology that's used for RFSAs, as well as the differentiation between funding sources, really understanding in depth Title II and all of the different elements under that, as well as community development funds and what makes that different from Title II. So we can move to keeper. Another theme that came up was key personnel. Some partners noted that having key personnel laid out in the RFA really was helpful in identifying what BHA's priorities were. But then other partners noted that the number of roles that are considered key personnel and the prescriptiveness of what is expected of the qualifications for those personnel seem to be increasing over time. Another concern around key personnel was recruitment challenges with the uncertainty of reward. And again, the timing of the awards here. And so being able to have someone sign a letter of commitment for a particular project that's not guaranteed, and it may be a year before that project has even started. Another concern that was raised was just the roles of key personnel at the different stages of the RFA process and what's actually possible or practical for those. So I'll know that group will discuss that today. And the last theme that we're going to discuss today, that one of the breakout rooms will be discussing today, is contextual information. So about half of the partners found that the contextual information that was already provided in the RFA was useful, thorough, and a good launching point for proposals. But in certain cases, it was found that the context analysis did not necessarily align with the reality of the local context. And so many organizations went on and did their own context analysis on top of what was already done by BHA in preparation for the RFA release. Another note of concern of, really the context and who's in that local geography was coordination with existing or planned USAID programs, and that there was often insufficient information that was provided, and there was inconsistency between the releases of RFSAs and other USAID programs, especially those types of programs that the RFSA really needed to coordinate well with, especially for sequencing and layering activities. So again, just want to reiterate that a lot of the feedback that we received during the interviews was focused on issues and recommendations to improve proposal process, but we really want to ground our conversations in the goal of improved quality programs. So as you're discussing today's themes, be thinking about how these changes in the RFA and proposal design can really address issues of quality program implementation, of intervention prioritization, and sustainability of outcomes. So I'm going to pause and see if there are any comments.
Yeah, Suzanne, we have a question, a really good question in the chat that maybe one of our BHA colleagues can address, about assuming that it's okay to reference the draft Haiti and Mozambique RFAs when discussing good/bad examples of how the process has evolved. Is that okay? Somebody from BHA like to address this?
Yes, that's okay. We just can't provide any technical advice on strategy or otherwise that may provide additional kind of opportunities or advantages to particular applicants.
Thank you, Dan. Hi, it's Anyoli. I'll also add that we did have a comments period for these RFAs that went out to the community for comments and review. So we hope that issues will have been addressed there as well. So this is not, we're not intending to reopen this for comment, but we'll take it and decide at our own discretion what we want to do with it. Over. Thanks.
Thanks, Dan. Thanks, Etienne. And I think that seems consistent with the overall general comments. This is an example, that type of thing being welcome, but yes, the specific things and response from BHA, just understand that there are limitations there. I see another comment about wanting to raise the idea of discussing the budgets / cost proposals. That was actually not something that came up very consistently across the different interviews in terms of the what partners raised as a concern. We can put it as a note for the parking lot and something to potentially explore later on. Where relevant, though, during your discussions in your breakout rooms today, I would encourage you that you can speak to some of that. But it across the various interviews that we had, it just was not consistently raised. So I know that, and just to note on that, there were many different things that we could narrow in on and discuss, but we really wanted to make sure that we used the time over these next 2 days to talk about the things that most consistently were raised across multiple partners as issues to address and, solutions that we wanted to find. So there's any number of even more specific areas that could be addressed. We could have a week-long stakeholder consultation, I'm sure, on RFSA, RFAs, and design and getting into quality programming. But we do want to continue to use the stakeholder consultation mechanism as a way to bring implementing partners and BHA together to problem solve, and to come up with new approaches, as Karen was speaking to yesterday about really the purpose of these stakeholder consultations. So we're going to ask you that at the end of the day. What other ideas do you have for these events and consultations? But throughout the day, if you come up with ideas and things like of what further is to be discussed, and if it's not necessarily fitting into the themes that we're discussing today, let's put them in the parking lot. We'll have them in our notes, and we can revisit afterwards to whether those rise to the level of having their own separate consultation or other type of meeting. Okay. Maya.
So we're going into breakout rooms, just like we did yesterday. Each group will discuss one of the themes that Suzanne just went through. Each room will have a facilitator guiding the discussion and a note taker to capture it. You will be given time individually first to read through the feedback and recommendations for that specific theme. Of course, that feedback and recommendation, as a reminder, were pulled from the qualitative outreach and what you all shared with us. And I believe Suzanne B from Ideal just shared the feedback document in the pre-read in the chat. So if you want to download that and have that handy, that's recommended. You'll be discussing as a group the feedback and recommendations, and then identify any missing recommendations. And then in the end, you'll need to prioritize 1, 2, 3 recommendations that will bring to the big group. Also remember to choose someone from the group who can report back in the gallery walk that we'll do as a plenary. So we've added a little bit of time compared with yesterday. So it's a total of 85 minutes now, which includes a 10-minute break. So your facilitator you'll decide as a group when to take that break during the time you're away in the breakout room. And we won't have, just like yesterday, we won't have a French breakout room or interpret, but we will have an interpreter in the room where we know they're are 1 or 2 French speakers. If you are a French speaker and don't have an interpreter in your room, let us know and we'll move things around. And we can do, so what we can do in a breakout room is consecutive interpretation where someone speaks and then you pause for the interpreter to interpret and so forth. So that's the solution for that. I think that's it. And unless we have any questions about that, we'll see you back in the main room in 1 hour and 25 minutes.
So now we're going to, similar to yesterday, we're going to take a walk around the breakout room boards, and the representative chosen from your group will share what you discussed regarding your themes and what recommendations you prioritized. Remember, when your group is not presenting, we encourage you to use the chat to add your comments or questions. If your group is presenting, you can also use the chat to provide any clarification on why you came to that recommendation as well. Again, you can use your raise your hand. I'll ask that you not unmute yourself because it's hard for me to see that with all these groups, but when you raise your hand, it pops to the top of my screen so I can see who is wanting to speak. So let's start off with group 1, who discussed barriers to application for new and non-historic partners.
Hi, Susan and everyone. This is Jackie here from APSI. I'm going to report out from our group. So we had a really lively discussion. There were 4 or 5 partners in our group. Most of us were in that category of new non-historical partners. So that was quite interesting. We talked about quite a range of issues that we face in submitting proposals to BHA for these RFSAs. And they ranged from technical things like the theory of change issues, theory of change style and formatting and all of the requirements there, as well as the budgeting and the commodity management and just the submission portal and, kind of all of the different things. Big theme was that it's a huge investment, as we heard yesterday as well, the huge investment it takes to do one of these proposals is a big barrier to entry. So 3 recommendations that we came up with. I think you want me to focus on the recommendations, right? So let me just get in there. So the one that you can see, number 6, will most likely overlap with some topics that were addressed in the other groups, but we think there might be a way to limit the technical requirements needed for the initial proposal, the number of annexes as an example, with the understanding that some of that additional information can be fleshed out either during co-creation or during the refinement period. So we didn't get into a whole lot of detail there in terms of recommending what should be shifted, but just kind of the general idea. Number 7 relates to commodity management. That was seen as a really big barrier for new partners who've never done and never proven to BHA the capacity to do commodity management. It's a huge barrier for new partners to enter when a procurement requires that heavy percentage of Title II commodities. So one proposal would be that BHA could somehow contract that part out separate from the delivery of the actual program. So maybe that's a bold idea, but that's what our group came up with. That would be a big game changer in terms of new partners being able to enter. And then number 8 there is around BHA's encouraging new and local national applications. We ended up just using that kind of simple word of encourage, in that there could be different ways of doing that, of encouraging, but at least having some explicit statements in the RFA documents about how BHA is interested in new and local applicants. And then we would recommend that BHA look more carefully at how that might be scored or evaluated some way, so that it's not just a nice idea, but it also carries some weight in terms of evaluation. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Jackie. All right, do we have any comments, questions, reactions? Don't see any hands up yet, but I'll give a minute, a few seconds for people if they're typing in the chat, although I'd encourage you to put your hand up. All right. Well, thank you. The recommendations are clear. They stand on their own. They'll be great for us when we move to the prioritization exercise. Again, not seeing anything. Okay. So group 2, which spoke about RFA release timing. Please, who is reporting out from your group?
This is Jeremy. I am sorry,
Jeremy.
I couldn't find the hand fast enough to let you know.
Okay.
I just raised my real hand instead of
Yes.
the virtual one. If you can, would you be able to zoom down, just to zoom in on those 3 boxes with the stars on them so everybody can see them better? Perfect, thank you. So we talked about timing of RFA release and kind of the timing of the entire process. And so the part that I draw your attention to first is the box in the bottom left corner of your screen. And what we did is we mapped out what we think would be from the implementing partner perspective or the applicant perspective, the ideal steps and timelines for each of those steps throughout the process. And the point of this is really to make sure that we're improving, that applicants are able to improve the quality of the design of a program. That's really the ultimate goal. So it would be fun to kind of have a discussion about this afterward if you all would want. So what we first said is country identification. The first step in the process is just country identification, just notifying applicants, notifying the general public of which countries are going to be included, or even might be included in the upcoming round of applications. And we said that April of the fiscal year prior to the release would be the ideal time, because oftentimes around the summertime, we're starting to already have conversations with other organizations about partnerships or looking at local organizations, starting to do some of that initial reconnaissance and market intelligence work. So that's kind of the ideal time frame. And then there's that space of time from April until about September or maybe October, when the draft RFA would be released. And again, there are a lot of factors to take into account. We know certainly with BHA in terms of reviews and other responsibilities, the end of the fiscal year is a very busy time of year. I think we certainly recognize that, but I think again, kind of thinking of the longer process, this would be really helpful. And then a final RFA being released in January. And we did talk about how RFAs or final RFAs will come out kind of just before holidays occasionally. We understand, again, constraints, but that was a topic that was raised. And so the 2 points here is kind of final RFA coming out in January, but there's also that space of time of about 3, maybe 4 months between the draft RFA and the final RFA coming out. And one of the things that we talked about is even though the draft RFA says partners shouldn't start actually working on an application until the final RFA, I mean, we're all starting. We've all started the work, maybe not all, but ideally we've started the work before the draft RFA is even out. So that would help just in terms of working on the full proposal. And then the timeline from the final RFA to submission is another 60 to 90 days. So what we put in here is an ideal submission date of April. And again, still making sure that there's enough time at the tail end for sufficient review and feedback and issues letters to make sure that the procurement is finalized before the end of the fiscal year. The next step in the process, issues letters and or oral presentations around the May, June, July timeframe. And so we talked a bit about kind of oral presentations and how that we see them as being valuable in the process when it helps to make a decision on which applicant you want to choose. But if it's not necessary, the timelines and sometimes turnarounds for a 2 or 3 week response for an issues letter, incorporating all those changes and putting together a full oral presentation and traveling internationally, having people travel internationally in the midst of that to be present for an oral presentation is a very crunched timeline. So we wanted to take that into account as well. And again, the goal of this is really focusing on ultimately the quality of the final proposal design that ends up being signed into procurement. And then the last step of the process was co-creation, and we were thinking co-creation would happen around July. We also did, this was a bit beyond the scope of our group, but we did kind of question if the co-creation process pre-award is something that's valuable, particularly considering that R&I does have quite a few co-creation elements to it now. And so that's, then if you look to the box to the right, that's one of the other recommendations that we had, is kind of making that co-creation process part of the post-award activity, and refining that what it looks like as a part of that first year of the program, first year or two of the program. And then the final thing that I point is the box to your upper right, which is just throughout the process, just communicating any changes, to these milestone dates transparently, ideally through USA Business Forecast, including the information there. And when there are changes, I think, we all see that there are changes even when things are on the business forecast, but that transparency, we think would help, again, the quality of applications and help even new partners who don't typically apply, that give them a little more chance to prepare. So I think that was summarized, as I may have overdone my time, but that was the summary from our group, unless there's anyone else from our group who wanted to cover something that I missed.
I'll give, if anyone else from group 2 wants to add in, also if you want to raise your hand or put into the chat any comments, questions, reactions to these recommendations. Liz.
Yeah, I'm wondering for the timeline that you guys gave, you didn't incorporate some of the other recommendations, I think, that have been maybe doing a shorter version or something, along some more of the newer, smaller partners potentially to participate. That's not like a given that we would that BHA would do that, or if you guys discuss that element at all in terms of would add however many months to the timeline, and how that would look.
Liz, you were breaking up a little bit.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, I got a thing that said my internet connection was unstable.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, if you want to go off video, that might help a little bit.
Sure.
And then maybe repeat.
I can also type it maybe in the chat if that doesn't work. Can you guys hear me better now?
This seems clear, yes.
Okay, great. I was just saying some of the discussion I think that we've had and that's been in the pre-read was about adding some kind of a shorter submission, whether that's like a concept note or just or whatever that ends up looking like. Of course, it's not a given that will be adopted, that recommendation will be adopted, but I didn't know if your group talked about what that might look like in this timeline, because this is more of the closer to the sort of traditional timeline, or the ideal of the traditional timeline that has been used in the past. So I was wondering if you guys talked about that.
Jeremy, do you want to respond to that? And then Lori has a comment.
Actually, Lori, you want to go for it?
Or Lori, go ahead if you're part of that group, please.
Yeah. So we did not discuss that, but our topic was RFA release timing or something like that. The next group is looking at the multi-stage processes. So we did not consider that, but hopefully the next group will have some great ideas for that. Over.
Thanks, Lori.
And Suzanne, I did want to note that that was actually one of the prioritized recommendations from yesterday's breakout room discussion, was that to review the timing for the requirements across the various stages.
Yep. Again, like we had said, there are different things that'll come up across these themes that do reach into other ones, so that it's good to have these kind of cross discussions too. I see, Mara, you have a comment into the chat. Just taking into account, I guess, school and timing like that. So I think that's, I think also just, what the timings are for people who are working on the proposal, even wherever in the world they might be, and what that timing suggests too. All right. Any other comments, questions? So we can move to group 3, which spoke about the multi-phased approach to proposal process, all of the processes. And who is reporting out for this group?
Hi, Susan.
Thanks. All right,
reporting on this. Thanks. So I think there was a really interesting discussion among the group from these different stages, from pre-RFA to the draft to concept to oral presentation to the co-creation, refine and implement. Well, there was kind of some link I can see from the previous group in some of these discussions. But our top 3 again summarize on this. The first one is really consider modifying requirement by proposal stages that would help in general to see how the implementing partners can also adapt, being that at some stages, then if you don't have that kind of a flexibility, then it's difficult to actually plan ahead. And when the implementing partner also have multiple actors that need to participate in some of those stages, including local partners, and sometimes up until you really hear what is the plan for the next stage, then it is a bit difficult to plan for those. So the flexibility on that is really key. And the other thing is, like, I think that led to the point of co-creation. However, when it comes to the co-creation stage with the apparently successful applicant, we see in most stages that there is more of business developers participating on those, and less on like key personnel or people who will be implementing. And while that is really a kind of important stage by, taking that knowledge from co-creation into implementation, is so important that you will not lose some kind of information, some kind of key actions that were required when you have people involved from that stage to the implementation, refine and implement through implementation. So for that, I think the recommendation is to explore that possibility with BHA to actually share the risk, having a pre-award kind of a letter or something that can reassure the implementing partner at that level to have some of those key personnel that can continue on would be very helpful into those stages up to refine and implement. I see that the previous group was recommending making co-creation process post-award. Probably that also can be a solution to that helping that reassurance for implementing partner to really kind of have a solid team that can take up from the design to implementation, because sometimes we lose that kind of connection between those who design and those who are implementing, and you go into refine, and then that's a new stage as well when you are dealing with the whole of setting up the kind of the startup setup. So that will lead into the third one, which is increasing flexibility around the timing and the sequencing of the refine and implement to accommodate IP realities around staffing. So you will do all those stages until you get awarded, but I think it is noted from implementers that it is really a difficult time to bridge between the award and then the refine and implementation period workshop that came in maybe 3 months or at maximum 4 months afterwards, when you have to really kind of build a team that you believe can can build a foundation for a successful implementation. And it is key for those ones at least to be part of the define and implement, because of getting again that experience that really can lead it into the whole changes, or at least the changes that will be involved from the define period, especially the first year moving to the remainder years. Those are the key recommendations we had from the group, but anyone who can add something if I've missed, that would be great. Over.
Lenore, did you want to add?
Well, I just wanted to, I liked a lot of what he was saying. Just the co-creation for me is, we've participated in a couple of these. Even when you know you're getting the award, it's still extremely budget intense. You have to send several staff, you've got to get your key personnel involved before you have an award and before there's funding. So I would prefer that type of thing. I'd like to hear from other implementers to happen, not just with a potential notice to proceed, but within the funding period, if possible, if you could consider that.
Right, we'll open it up to comments, questions. I would expect a few here because even some of the recommendations from yesterday were related to this phased approach and different requirements at different stages. Just a reminder in terms of raising your hand, there's 2 different places where the raise your hand function may be depending on the version of Zoom that you have, either under the participants button. When you click in that and there's a raise your hand option, or under reactions. So for me, it's under reactions. For some, it's under participants. Just check those 2 different buttons and see which one has the raise hand function. Great. And yes, as Lori pointed out, group 2 had a recommendation on co-creation. That is part of the prioritized recommendations. Liz, do you want to speak to your comment about?
Yeah, I was just thinking, that if there are several other, there are multiple ways, to do this, and there's, if some of those other like recommendations are adopted, that changing the phases may not be necessary, because then you will have accomplished some of those goals that you guys outlaid in the very beginning, right? Of like lowering the burden, lowering the cost. You know, so I think we have to look at what, you know, what is the best pathway for arriving at that goal that we, those couple of goals that we put forth in the very beginning. So, you know, I think, while I think this whole brainstorming process is great, I think, you know, at the end, I think something has to, you know, there will be certain things that are adopted and certain things that aren't adopted. And I think that it's good to keep in mind, you know, how they interact with each other.
Great. Any other comments, questions, reactions? Otherwise, we'll move to group 4. All right. Group 4 spoke about key personnel. Mara, you're reporting out for your group?
Yeah.
Okay. Go ahead.
So we came up with 3 recommendations. Maybe we could zoom in a little bit for the first one with the star. Yeah, that's good. So we felt that a smaller number of fixed key personnel positions with strict requirements would really help in terms of, you know, being able to, what shall I say, you know, right now we have somewhere between 5 or 7 key personnel that were required to deliver, and where it's necessary to, you know, for those positions to have somewhere between, you know, have master's degrees or PhDs, and they need to have a certain number of years of experience, et cetera. And we know that that's all aimed at ensuring quality in the award. But what that can also do in many cases is create an imbalance between those at the top and the people at the ground level, which, you know, who also required to have very good requirements to, you know, be highly skilled and, you know, have meet certain requirements as well, and deliver high quality. And if you don't have a good skill set for those personnel, you know, also can become, you know, that can also impact the quality of what is delivered on the award. So I think that's an important one to keep in mind. And then we were thinking there are other technical and management functions that can be defined, but the applicant can propose how to address them. So there may be other positions that are high level that support the program, but maybe not clearly defined in terms of, you know, roles, and are not necessarily meeting all the technical requirements or experience requirements that current key personnel need to meet. So those are very strict, and we feel that other roles could be filled in other ways. In terms of the key personnel qualifications, we all felt that they are very high, and the need to, in some cases, there is not a balancing of those functions, of those qualifications with what's available in the labor market. There's also an issue of I think just being able, the effort involved in recruiting those positions is sometimes, quite onerous, quite difficult, etc. And can take considerable time. And also, when the qualifications are high and you need to deliver a high quality person, the cost for those people will increase because they are interviewing with all of the applicants and they are picking and choosing. So the cost of those key personnel will increase because it's a seller's market. Okay, so we even thought about, well, what if it's possible for some key personnel to be non-exclusive or reduce the qualifications somewhat so that we could get, a better person who is very good, but maybe doesn't cost an arm and a leg and is willing to, work at a lower price. I think there's also, in some cases, some assumptions about, that people with more experience may be better than people with less experience. For some roles, like the, I guess, the strategic learning lead, or in some cases they're called the CLA lead, that someone with lots of experience will do a better job, but that's not always the case, because people with less experience may know how to work with social media, etc., in ways that others do not.
Mara, I'm gonna ask you to move to the next recommendation because we have one more. We have one more group to get through too.
I was just about to do that. Thank you.
Great.
And then finally, we felt that having to put all the key personnel in with the submission is difficult. Because then we wind up doing multiple recruits over and over again, as people review our submissions, and maybe we'd have more time to recruit a better person. We do need to ensure that there's a budget for those additional positions, but we think that this just providing a little bit more time and saying that certain positions do not need to be fully recruited except for when someone is designated as the apparently successful applicant, the ASA, that would help. Okay, I'm done. Over.
Thank you, Mara. Again, please put into the chat or raise your hand if you have any comments, questions on this one. I just have an initial comment that in the recommendations that stated as number 3 is not clearly coming out to me as recommendation language. So just wanting to, when we do this, our end exercise of the recommendation there is to limit or include a smaller number of fixed key personnel positions with strict requirements in the RFA, correct? And have those other ones required. So maybe we'll just add that clarification language.
Yeah, and I think one more point on that one, and I'm sorry to belabor this, but is that a lot, there is a regulation related to that particular one, which limits to the number to either 5 key personnel or 5% of the overall LOE. But I think that should be based on cash, not the total value if there's a large commodity component.
All right, I don't see, we see any new thing else in the chat, or so let's move on to group 5, which discuss contextual information.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Just very quickly, the discussion on the contextual information side really focused on that kind of, while it's helpful, the information that USAID provides as kind of a foundation point, it is relatively at a higher level. It's not necessarily very contextualized to the locality of some of the areas that we're in, and requires quite a bit of investment from those of us who go after these awards to go out into the villages and talk to people. We also had some ideas around the burden that it placed not only on the IPs, but on the local stakeholders themselves. They often hear from many of us in the same week. I've followed some teams. Yeah. Anyway, so just in general, our 3 recommendations, or 3 priority recommendations, include provide more clear information, rationale, and context on why certain regions, intervention areas, goals, purposes, and needs, and USAID perceived priorities of target populations are within are selected in a country. I think again, it's this balance we talked about yesterday between how much is defined by USAID and how much of it is open for us to define as implementing partners. And the recommendation was that where possible, could we get more granular information down to the sub-region level. The next was to explore ways for BHA to reflect more on stakeholder, or to do itself the stakeholder consultation in the RFA to relieve the burden from applicants and local stakeholders. Again, going back to what I mentioned before, that a lot of these stakeholders have to meet with all of us, and the applicants themselves are going out and doing the kind of, we're all doing the same types of level of research down at that local level to get more contextual information. And then finally, we'd ask BHA to really explore which of the analyses that is requested at the proposal stage are really necessary for the proposal, and what can be shifted to the refine year. When and also that contextual element, what parts of that contextual analysis can happen in the refine year, when we're going to be doing more of that anyway. So thank you.
Thanks, Joellen. All right, do we have any comments, questions, reactions? Again, feel free to raise your hand. Lori.
Yeah, I'm a little bit surprised by the comment about that BHA should do more stakeholder consultation. Because to me, that wouldn't be satisfactory. You know, I mean, I feel like we need to do that. We need to engage directly with people. So maybe I'm misunderstanding something, or is that just me?
I think the intent was to look at the burden of the proposal process, and the fact that in the refine and implement time, you will be doing that stakeholder engagement. It's that the information we receive from USAID on the context usually isn't granular enough. And so all of the implementing partners who are going after these bids are seeking out that data. And often we bump into each other, and it puts a burden on the local stakeholders who have to meet with all of us. So would it be more effective for BHA to take the contextual information that they provide for the RFA and bring it down to that sub-regional level and give us a little bit more granularity, rather than have all of us going out and trooping around for it? It's a idea. And again, it's that balance that we have to figure out how to do.
Dan, I saw you had your hand up, but it looks like you lowered it. Was it clarified?
I considered commenting that, also if every applicant is trying to meet, for example, with the same government officials and validate their design with the same government officials, it becomes problematic in terms of just confidentiality of the proposal that we're developing, because if we ask people to promise to keep it confidential, but then they're meeting 5 more times that week with other applicants also, flogging their ideas. So it might be better all around for everybody if USAID conducted these consultations and then shared the results with everybody.
Right. Thanks, Dan. Tierno.
Yeah, thanks. Just for the
Sorry, Tierno, you're very quiet.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me okay?
A little bit better.
Okay. No, just for the third recommendation regarding exploring which analysis to conduct, post-award, like in the refinement year, I wonder if the group discussed also the number of formative research involved in the refine year, if these are added to those ones, or are they suggesting to combine those and then put them as the formative research as such? Just saying, because I'm seeing a lot of research coming on in refine years, and then the suggestion to take these ones also to that. Is that a combination or a standalone additional researches? I would be a bit worried there will be too many at that point to do in the refine year. Over.
I think it's the idea of while in the refine year, you're doing this theoretically formative research, you're probably doing one on gender, which again, do we need to do it before and after? What we've found is that some of the analyses and the annexes that we put in the proposal, we then have to take them out and then do them again or refine them even further. So while it's good to have a good head start, I guess the question is, do we as implementing partners want to do this work? Would we rather do this work before we know if we won or after, when we have the contract signed? And I think a lot of people felt that it would be more effective and improve the quality if we weren't so much focused on getting these annexes done, but figuring out what information we needed to have a high quality proposal.
Thanks, Jill. Penny, and then we do need to keep moving forward. So if you have any other comments or questions or reactions, please put them in the chat and we'll capture them for our notes.
The points everyone is making about the difficulties of all of us going out and doing assessments in the same communities are excellent points, but I feel like I just want to speak up for the advantages of our doing that. I mean, I think that one of the goals is to have various applications that are aiming towards the same end goals, but have different approaches of doing it and are really drawing on our understanding of the context and having that inform the design. So even though I think every point that was made was very well founded, I worry that if we work off sort of central information and don't come back until the R&I stage, we might be missing opportunities to really make an innovative, context-driven application that can be seen from the very get-go, from the design stage.
Penny, you're talking about the stakeholder and not the gender analysis and all those things, right?
I guess I'm talking about, I think we were talking about sort of like I thought the suggestion was that we could have like a deeper context analysis from BHA and not go out ourselves to talk to the same people again and again. And while acknowledging those points, I just think that there can be so much that can be gained in the way in which you're doing your program, the way in which you're responding to context, that it would be kind of a shame to give up our own interaction. But yes, acknowledging that the all of the annexes as well require.
I don't think anybody has said that that nobody should do it. It's saying, look, it is a barrier to entry as well for other partners. So if some of this research was more, if some of the contextual analysis that we're given as part of the RFA process included a lot, because I think one of the comments was there wasn't a lot of information available for example, Centre Nord in Burkina. And it's true, we had to go out for 6 months and dig up that information. You just can't put it into Google and pop up a lot of stuff. That's a reality. But the question is it more efficient to allow or to ask USAID to do some of that up front, provide it to us, and then in the RFA, and then allow partners to make the determination on whether or not the level at which they have to go out and do that additional research.
Great, thank you all. Thank you for each of the groups and the report outs and the good discussion that we're having here. We want to quickly move to our parking lot and to go over the new pieces that were put into there. So we heard earlier today that complexity of the cost proposal is, something to consider. And I do think that a couple of the groups did discuss that. But we have that note for ourselves in terms of, further discussion that may be needed. Another comment that came out that wasn't necessarily fit well under a specific theme was just in terms of the timing or the amount of time given for addressing issues letters questions and that two weeks allowing 2 weeks for those responses is extremely tight. And another note we have here from today is explore how varied scales of projects affects integration, layering, and sequencing. Integration is one of the content focus areas for IDEAL. So this is, certainly something we can look at and take this to our technical advisory panel on integration and can explore that more as well. And so we're going to take a 5-minute break. 5 minutes. This is a little bit of a logistical break. So I know some of you took a break after the end of your breakout rooms. So feel free to turn off your cameras, stretch, get water. But we're going to return in, please return in 5 minutes. We're changing that. And we will get to prioritizing all of these recommendations across the different themes. So thank you, everyone. See you soon.
11:15.
Yes.
11:15, everybody.
11:15.
Eastern time.
Yes, 15 after.
I'm calling everybody back from your break. If you could turn your videos back on and let us know that you are back and ready to engage in this final, potentially most important part of the 2 days, which is our prioritization activity of all these recommendations. So welcome back. Do I have everybody? All right. So for this next activity, we have migrated all of the prioritized recommendations from all the breakout room discussions from yesterday and today over to this frame that you see in your Zoom screen. And first, we're going to give you about 5 minutes to read through all of these sticky notes here. And while you're doing that, we'd like you to take note of anything else that you'd like to discuss with the group that hasn't already been discussed. And we would encourage more of clarification questions here. If in case to jog your memory, if you're not quite remembering what the recommendation was about, just having a quick clarification question or something. So as you're reading through, take note of that. And when we come back in a 5 or so minutes after you've read through, we'll bring those clarifying questions forward, or you can also just put them in the chat box at any time. And again, this is where the zooming function in Zoom will be helpful to you, I think. So again, you can go to view options at the top of your screen and pick your Zoom percentage, and then move your little hand around your cursor that turns into a hand to really be able to zoom in on these post-it notes. We're also sharing a PDF version in the chat box now, so you can use also your PDF viewer on your computer to zoom in and read it better. So these will be all your options available to you for voting. We're going to be voting in a little bit. So really take these recommendations in and then start to choose and think about which 2 recommendations that you will be wanting to vote on in just a few minutes. All righty, bringing everybody back. All right, thanks for reading all of those post-its. We'll give some time, just a little bit of time, because I know we need to move quickly through this last portion of the event, but are there any burning clarifying questions on any of these recommendations that will help you decide on which way to vote? Okay. If not, then I do want to just quickly say that even if some of the recommendations don't make it into the top, 5, 10, whatnot, that BHA will still be considering all recommendations that have been brought forward here. And we also have all of the notes, the discussion notes, and all of the information that's been shared today and yesterday that we will be providing in a comprehensive report. And so all of this information will be available for consideration, but we just wanted to take the time to do this prioritization exercise just to give some sort of clear path forward, I guess, initially for these recommendations from the past 2 days. Also, BHA and IPs will be voting on these recommendations. So just encouraging everybody to vote. And we will be putting, the way that we are going to vote is we are going to be voting using a Zoom poll. And remember, as you vote, to consider again the following question of which recommendations do you think will best enable quality, effective RFSAs that reduce food insecurity? Each person can vote on a maximum of 2 recommendations. And we are trying to navigate a Zoom quirk here, so please listen carefully to these next instructions. Zoom limits the amount of responses for 1 question to, I think it is 10. So what we've had to do is make 3 quote unquote questions in the Zoom poll, but we want you to treat all of them as if it's 1 full list, like 1 full question. So all the options that you see under each question will be treated as 1 full question list. And so you'll need to pick up to 2 options from that full list. From all 3 questions, you'll be picking 2 options as your recommendations. Let me pause now to make sure everyone's understood that clarifying point about Zoom poll.
And if you have any questions when you see the Zoom poll pop up, you can also answer that.
Absolutely, you can put it in the chat or whatever you need to do. Okay, so we're gonna pop the poll up. It should just come right up on your screen. You'll see that it looks like it's divided into 3 questions, but in fact, just treat it all as 1. Uh-oh, it looks like people are having problems submitting the poll. Potentially, if we don't have an answer under one of the questions, does that mean we can't submit?
Yeah, if I choose an answer from under each one, then it's submit, like becomes ungrayed out. It allows me to submit.
Is there any way to make it a not required questions for all three, Kim or Suzanne B?
And if not, you can just go with 3.
But
not a big deal. Just go with 3.
Yeah, I don't know, Karen, because that may.
We may want 3, 1 from each group.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. We don't necessarily want that. So let's close the poll and see, and we'll change the settings.
Gotcha. Yeah, because it would force them to vote from those categories.
Especially the third one, which only has a few.
Good point.
Yep.
Yeah, I think we just need to make them a non-required questions to submit.
Thank you for your patience while we deal with these logistics.
I see people really wanted to vote for 3. We hear you. These are a lot of recommendations, but as I mentioned before, they are all going to be taken into consideration. So hopefully that will
I think we're hearing a lot of voices around 1 and 3 and not 2.
We can give 3 as a reward for your patience while we deal with the polling.
I don't think we can make one of the questions non-required. But I wonder if we can just add under each category a not applicable question. And that way, if you don't want to vote on anything under, for example, the number 2, you just click not applicable. But you could still pick 3 overall from any of the categories, if you see what I mean.
Sorry, Maya.
Yeah.
I think we're maybe having trouble just adjusting the poll itself.
Is it not possible to add that not? See, I don't think I can go in.
So unfortunately, the poll options once the meeting has started and the poll has launched once are limited. Yeah, so unfortunately, we won't be able to add that option.
If we can we create a new poll? Recreate it on the back end? It would take
that may take more time. Maybe this is where we want to test out our annotation option.
Okay. If we make a new poll with just the numbers. Yeah. Diana is suggesting. So
what we're going to do is we are going to try out Zoom annotation, but we're going to give you 2 options. You can either do the Zoom annotation, or you can put in the chat box directly to myself or Suzanne your top 3 options. You can just private chat your top 3 options as an easy.
Suzanne A.
Sorry. Suzanne A. Sorry, Suzanne A. and myself in the chat. Put your top 3 recommendations, or if you go to view options at the top of your screen and you click on annotate. If you click on annotate, there's a stamp option and you'll see a little heart. And click on that heart and you'll be able to click on the screen your 3 recommendations. And if you want to undo, you can. If you accidentally put it in the wrong place, just click that undo button. Yep, I see people.
People are getting the hand of this, but yes, if you are having any issues with the annotation, please put it on to the sticky note, because when the hearts are a little bit outside of them, it's hard for us to tell which one it is related to.
That's right. So I see there's a heart underneath the in between 19 and 20. So whoever put that heart might need to undo and redo that. And then if you have any problems, again, just chat it to us. That might be the most straightforward as well. But we will take a screenshot of this at the end, and all of your votes will be accounted for.
People are asking us to say it again in the chat, the instructions again.
Yes, for annotation.
In the chat, please copy into the chat the instructions for annotation. Thank you. I've gotten a few messages with your votes too, so I will make sure to tally those as well.
And so verbally, again, you go to view options, go to annotate. A little edit bar should pop up on your screen. There should be an option for stamp. You can pick the heart and then click wherever you want on the screen. If you click wrongly, you can just put undo. There are a few floating hearts out there. Please, whoever put those hearts, if you could either undo or just clear your screen and start over, because we're going to be very confused about where those hearts are supposed to be going. You could. We might have had to do a practice run and then have everybody clear their screens and start over, because there are quite a few floating hearts out there.
I would just disregard them, because if you don't close the annotation screen, anywhere you click, you'll end with a heart. So if it's not on a post-it, maybe it just doesn't count.
Right. Yeah, we're not gonna, we won't try to guess what you're trying to put it on.
All right, so I'll give a couple more minutes to either annotate or chat us your votes. All right. Does anybody need more time? Raise your hand if you need more time, please. I want to make sure we have everybody who is on the call able to vote.
Doug, we gave people an extra vote for having to deal with our logistics issues. So
total of 3.
Total of 3.
If you think you accidentally put more than 3, please just clear and start over. It's a really quick process now that you've had some practice. Just clear. There's an option on that annotate edit bar that just says clear, that little trash can. Just clear my drawings and then start over. Okay, anybody need more time? Please raise your hand or indicate in the chat if you need more time for this. All right, well, with that, I thank you all very much for your participation. And a real heartfelt thank you for each of you, your engagement, your participation in the last 2 days of the stakeholder consultation. we acknowledge all the time and energy that you've put into these 2 days, but also prior to these 2 days, you've spent a lot of time with us in email communications and interviews and meetings and everything. And we're just so thankful for your engagement, your insights, and your rich discussion here. And I'm sure you're all now wondering, okay, we voted, what are the next steps? So here's what you can expect. We will report this. We'll be now moving into creating a report of the stakeholder consultation process, how we got to this point, including the qualitative outreach results that we have already shared with you. But we'll also be including aspects of the event over the last 2 days, all of our written discussions, overview of our written discussions, verbal discussions, all of that. And we'll be disseminating this report. You can expect it probably within the next couple of months. You can also expect that IDEAL and BHA will continue to move this dialogue forward about all of these prioritized recommendations, really all the recommendations, but especially the prioritized recommendations based on the voting that we just did. And then as feasible and allowable, the recommendations will move forward. And as we've mentioned many times, no guarantee on any of the recommendations, but we do guarantee that they will be considered. And if feasible and allowable, they will move forward. And then we're also planning in 3 to 6 months time from this event to do a follow-on report on any progress and any updates regarding what came out of this stakeholder consultation. So now I would like to hand it over to Joan Whalen, who is the lead for BHA's Applied Learning Team, to give some closing remarks to all of us before we end today's session. So Joan, I'll hand it over to you.
Sure, and I want to echo the thanks to everyone. It's always a very, very special thing to be able to take the time and hear directly from partners about the challenges you're facing in the work and how we can all collectively work together to try to create better programming. And it was really, really helpful, I know, for all of us to hear from you. We, as Bianca said, we will be taking into consideration all of the input. And not just, we can't promise action on everything that's feasible and allowable. We want to design a package around the RFA and the process that is going to make sense. And so depending on the direction that we go in, you know, that we do want to take into account all the nuance that we heard today. And the balances, the pros and cons of each of these. There's a cost to different directions we might go in. There are benefits depending on the direction that we go in. So all of that has to be weighed. And we have other considerations internally, and we have other inputs that we're gathering from the experience of these processes from our staff, both in Washington, D.C. and at missions around the world. And, you know, balancing it against, you know, midterm results. And so there's a lot of inputs. Something that was asked by one of the partners today. Yes, Mara, I was about to say that I heard you say this, and in our small group today, it was echoed by the other partners that were in the group, that it would be great to have some kind of feedback session down the road in terms of decisions that were made around, you know, timing and components and requirements and how we are going to approach these in the future. And it would be very helpful to be able to provide some feedback around why some final decisions were made and based on what. So I think that's a great idea, that feedback. So yeah, all to say that we are very anxious. We already have a debrief scheduled internally so that we can compare notes about what we heard and what it means, and, you know, the things that really resonated for us internally as well. So a heartfelt thanks from all of us that attended from BHA. I know already we've, you know, been capturing some of the key takeaways, and there's some really, 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 really important input that we heard in the last few days. So thank you.